Hello and welcome to a brand new podcast in which me and Mark have finally, after ages, landed on a format that we're probably both going to enjoy. Which I don't know why it took us this long to work this out. We're just going to watch Star Trek and talk about it.
Yep.
So, Mark, let's just start by... So, Mark, when did you first encounter the wonderful TV show that is Star Trek?
I feel like I'm going to alienate a lot of people immediately by saying that I am 33, and for the vast majority of my life, I was of the opinion that Star Trek is a lame show for nerds, and that no one who likes it is cool. And if anyone ever brings it up to me, it's because they've got nothing better to talk about, and they should all fuck off. How and ever. And incredibly, that's not the statement that's going to make people turn off this podcast. The statement that is going to make people turn off this podcast is that in 2009, a little movie director called J.J. Abrams took the Star Trek franchise and decided to make a movie. And after I watched the first trailer, I went, this looks really good. I should give Star Trek a shot. So I went out and I bought the first season of the original series, which was, let's say, slightly different from Mr. Abrams' vision. But I kind of immediately fell in love. However, I wouldn't call myself a newcomer. I'm not a novice when it comes to Star Trek. I'm intermediate. I have seen, I reckon there's about 90% of the Next Generation Voyager I've never seen. I have seen exactly one episode of Deep Space Nine. I kind of pick and choose where I go. Like the last couple of weeks, I have been watching just the Borg episodes because I'm kind of fascinated with the Borg. And I've seen kind of random ones here and there when they've been on the horror channel. The show I've probably seen the most of is the original series. But I love it. I obviously have seen episodes of Star Trek I didn't like and didn't think were very good. But all in all, I didn't really come to Star Trek until my mid-20s, so I didn't see it when I was a kid. But I love it now. Yeah, that's kind of my story.
Fucking hell, man. But it's like, don't worry, I'm certain no one's going to be angry about you being into it because of the J.J. Abrams movie. This is the internet, so it'll be fine, I'm certain. On the other hand, I can't remember not liking Star Trek. Right. I think I first saw some episodes of original series when I was about 7 or 8, and I was like, this is amazing. And then Next Generation came along, and it was in that time slot between The Simpsons starting at 6 and Neighbours finishing. It was like between 5 and 6 on BBC, and it was like in the same time slot that Buffy was on for half of the year.
Yeah.
So yeah, ended up watching. I think I've probably watched most of The Next Generation, but this was pre internet really being a thing. So right. I've seen most of it as it was broadcast, and I'm certain we're going to get to chunks that I never saw, because I've never gone back and I've rewatched a few episodes, but I've never rewatched it all. I have watched Deep Space Nine all the way through twice because it is the best Star Trek. I've watched a fair few of the original series, and I think I've watched, and this is what makes me sad, is I've probably watched 99% of Voyager, and I don't think Voyager is worth watching.
I like the Borg stuff from Voyager because, as I just said, that's the only stuff I've actually seen.
Oh, the point where Janeway goes from questionable command decisions and into full-on war crimes.
Oh, yeah, she is a terrible captain.
Yeah, she provides a genocidal race that wants to extinguish all life in the galaxy and replace them with their own thing. She provides them with weapons because it's quicker to get home that way.
So, the only Star Trek I have ever seen as it broadcast was Star Trek Discovery, and by as it broadcast, I mean I watched 10 minutes of the first episode and went, well, this is a pile of shit.
Yeah, I don't like Discovery either, and it's not like there's a lot of, this is something I want to point out. A lot of people going about how there's a lot of people who don't like Star Trek Discovery for really shitty fucking reasons. But the reason I don't like Star Trek Discovery is because the ship looks shit and I don't want to live on it. And I want to live on all of the Star Treks. Like, even like Deep Space Nine, which is a bit grungy, I'm like, this looks like fun, there's a bar. But, you know, like, I watch Star Trek Discovery and it's like, it's all dark and miserable and everything keeps fucking exploding. And you're constantly in massive space wars. But
yeah. And also, I'm not really a military guy. Like, my family were never in the military, unless you count the IRA. And who doesn't? I just have no compunction to do that whatsoever. However, on saying that, I would join Starfleet because I think that's a very noble thing to do. Simon Pegg puts it best in Star Trek Into Darkness, which hopefully we won't talk about too much, when they suggest bringing on the photon torpedoes, and Scotty turns them down, and Kirk gives him a bit of grief, and Scotty says, I thought we were supposed to be explorers. Yeah. Isn't that what we're here for? Which, that really speaks to me. Like, I really liked Stargate. I have seen every episode of Stargate.
Same here. I've watched every episode. It's so much fun.
I've even watched the animated series, just for pure shits and giggles. And Stargate I quite like because it is very military heavy, and it's interesting to see how the military would deal with these situations. But I really like Star Trek because I don't know, it feels interesting to watch Starfleet, and I know that they are supposed to be the Federation Navy.
Yeah.
But, you know, they're not super militaristic. They have to deal with the big questions. I like that.
Yeah.
And I feel like I lost a lot of time in my youth when I could have been watching Star Trek, doing things like trying to appear cool to other people by doing tap dancing, for example, for 7 years, and appearing in amateur dramatic productions of The Wizard of Oz as the Tin Man, the worst character. Whereas all the lame people who watched Star Trek had girlfriends and drugs.
This is you do have exactly the sort of hobbies that I would expect from a Starfleet officer, though, because nobody's ever like, what's your hobby? Oh, just sit and play the PlayStation 6000 of an evening. And it's always like, oh, what's your hobbies? Oh, I play 6 instruments and I can dance and I put on plays. Yeah. Nobody's ever like, you finish work, what are you going to do? I'm going to go get drunk, Steve. We deal with horrific, psychologically damaging things on a daily basis. Yeah. And it's weird we don't take time off.
I think that there is like a certain like appeal to me of just the Star Trek universe, of just a post-currency, because I hate money. I find it very uncomfortable and I don't like it, and I wish everything was free. Not because I want loads of stuff, but just because then people would be free to pursue their creative hobbies. And Star Trek offers a world in which that is completely possible, and I'd like to live in that world. Now, something else that offers that is, well, I don't know.
Universal basic income.
Yeah. Let's put a cut point here, right? And I'm gonna bring up something that I don't know whether we want to pollute the first episode of our Star Trek podcast with it, or if we want to do a special where we just discuss it at great length. But the Orville is the best modern Star Trek show, like by far.
Yeah, absolutely.
And all of the things I love about Star Trek are present in the Orville, and it illustrates it very well.
I had an idea for that, and that's if we do this long enough, our Christmas specials should just be Orville episodes.
Fuck yeah. I'm up for that, yeah.
Right.
Cut point.
Just be clear, yeah, we haven't said this to the audience, so we should say this. We are going to start with, we're going to do Next Generation first. When we finish every episode of Next Generation, maybe we'll go back and do the original series, but we're doing TNG because it's in everybody's top 2 Star Treks. I think it's fair to say that if you're a fan of the original series, your second best is Next Generation. If you like Next Generation, it's your favourite. My favourite's Deep Space Nine, and Next Generation is my second favourite. So we're just going to start with TNG.
My favourites are TNG and then the movie Galaxy Quest.
If Galaxy Quest counts as a Star Trek movie, it keeps alive the good bad odd even numbering for the films.
Oh yeah, it does. Yeah, doesn't it? Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, so we will be starting with Encounter at Farpoint. And so I did mention to you, Mark, beforehand that I want to mention on this is my Netflix did open at season 3, which might be because of where I was watching Star Trek, or might just be a service. Because it was only after we agreed to do this that I suddenly remembered how bad parts of season 1 and season 2 are. And I would like to say, just straight off the bat, Encounter at Farpoint, far better than I fucking remember it being. So we're watching these on Netflix, so they're the digitally remastered ones, which I've never got around to seeing, like a lot of these. So it looks great, because this was originally, Mark, this wasn't CGI. This was done with models on string.
Nice. My first observation, I took a lot of notes about Encounter at Farpoint, is that the episode starts off with an incredibly cinematic shot of Captain Picard in the dark, walking into the light, shown onto him by a window into space, and is then followed by some god-awful camera work involving a tripod that someone obviously kicked. So some wonderful cinematic stuff accompanied by some technically amateur hour camera work, which to me is a microcosm of the whole show.
Yeah, definitely in the first couple of seasons, that is a perfect summation of my views on Next Generation. One thing I've just written in my notes, my first note is, because watching this critically for the first time, I thought it should be a bit more analytical, and my first note I've written down is, the intro is so fucking great.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's fucking incredible.
I actually think I've talked about this on our myriad of other podcasts. When I die, if I die, I want my funeral, and I don't care the logistics of this. They are going to figure it out, right? I want to be fired naked into space, but when I'm fired, as you follow it up into the upper atmosphere, I just want the opening notes of the Star Trek The Next Generation theme to begin, played on piano. And then when we get to that part, I want everyone to salute.
Okay. So, another thing I do need to mention is, of course, the one that is the classic Star Treks being presented to us in glorious 4:9. None of that distracting widescreen to bother with. We're going to focus deeply in on the story.
We're not here for this because this isn't the cinematography podcast. I will defend the 4:3 format to the death. So keep those fucking opinions to yourself.
I like it as well. I've watched The Lighthouse.
Yeah.
And then I've written down, because I clearly read it because I saw the actor's name pop up in the credits. Q is in this one. Hooray.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the introduction of the Galaxy class Enterprise, and throughout this this episode, we'll get lots of like basic bits that are there just to establish cool shit that the Galaxy class has, including a scene later on where Riker is incredibly impressed by what is basically an Alexa.
Yeah, I know that. So I do, because obviously I want my girlfriend to be one of the 6 people who listen to this, and she doesn't give a fuck about Star Trek. So I'm worried that this might not be as accessible to people that aren't watching along with us. So Eddie, Ensign Edwards.
Yes.
I would like you to tell me the plot of both parts of the episode Encounter at Farpoint, and you have 30 seconds to do so. Your time starts now.
Okay, the Enterprise is going to a space station because it's a little bit weird what's going on there. It's a starbase, it's on a planet, but they don't know how it got there because the people who live there don't have the technology to make that sort of thing. On the way, they get stopped by Q, who is essentially Space God. We don't have time to go into
15 seconds.
Right. He gives them the task of working out what's going on at Farpoint. They get there. It turns out that the Farpoint station is actually an alien that's being kept as a prisoner. Another alien turns up. The Enterprise free it. They let it go, and Q goes, okay, good enough, and doesn't kill all of the human race. I think that's it.
Bosh! Exactly 30 seconds. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that was it. So turns out the thing that spoilers for a show that was released in 1987. Turns out the planet that they're going to is a big jellyfish, a space jellyfish.
Yeah, a space jellyfish that's crash landed on a planet and can do other things other than being a jellyfish. So they've used it for those purposes.
Yeah. Now, as the pilot, right? Obviously, this has to do a lot. It has to introduce us to the characters, and most importantly, tell us their names.
Yeah.
And the best way that it does that is at one point, Geordie LaForge comes up to Commander Riker and says, "Sir, report from the Enterprise. They've..." And then Riker goes, "Sorry, is this an official report, Lieutenant?" And he goes, "Oh, sorry, sir. Lieutenant Geordie LaForge reporting in. We've received a report from the Enterprise that they have docked." So all he does is give him the exact same information and stands a bit more straight and says his name, which is the best way I have ever seen the writers get around. Geordie hasn't told us what his name was, and we don't want people to stigma him as, the guy with the thing. Which, to be fair, would be a lot more of a signifier and be a lot less uncomfortable than going, the black guy. So, I like that they had him, they specifically had Geordie say his name because they're like, well, he's got a weird thing on his face and we're going to want people to say his name rather than the black dude with the weird thing on his face.
Yeah.
But,
I was also going to say, with this being a pilot, I think that they... So things that a lot of people... Like, things about Star Trek Season 1 of TNG that a lot of people won't know is, for example, Geordie LaForge isn't the chief engineer at this point. He's just one of the, guys. The core crew... And Worf isn't the security officer. And it seems from a lot of the shoot, the way that the shots are put together, that they were kind of banking on their core characters being Picard, Councillor Troy, Data, and Tasha Yar. But they're also, a lot of the writers on this were the writers for the original series. So I imagine after finishing this episode, that was, they went, it's just, writing women like they're people. That's tiring. Let's start that off. I do also want to point out, so a lot of people that might not know, is Next Generation takes place is a post-apocalyptic franchise. There has been an apocalypse on Earth. There's been multiple horrifying wars, and to demonstrate how terrible these are, Data doesn't know what the word Snoop means, which does suggest that this is indeed a future where they have forgotten about Dre.
Where Martha Stewart was known only as a housekeeper and a woman in jail. Now, rather than redeeming herself by selling lighters along with Snoop Dogg. Is that a reference that you understand, Eddie?
Yes.
Good.
Yes, it is.
It's not going to be explained for anyone else. So, you are right. Now, as I can't really remember TOS, the original series. So, how much do we know about World War III? It was established in the original series that it did happen, right?
It did happen, and the main thing we know is there was that war, and then after that there was the eugenics war.
Yeah, that was in the 90s.
And that was, that supposedly happened in the 1990s, and it's one of those annoying bits of Star Trek lore that because we've hit the point where it should have happened, we're now definitely in a different timeline. But you also can't say it didn't happen because it's Khan's origin story.
Yeah.
So you can, if you can do it if you don't want to do Khan, which, as J.J. Abrams has shown, nobody wants to do Star Trek and doesn't want to do Khan. So, there was a World War III. There was a eugenics war, and as is established in this, in a brief mention, there was a period known as the atomic horror.
And what does the atomic horror look like? Tell the listeners what that is portrayed as. Like what?
Well, I've
because Q is, like you say, space god. He's like an omnipotent being, so he can create reality around him. And one thing that he does is take 4 of the crew the 4 that you mentioned and take them essentially back in time to the 2070-ish era.
Yeah. And I've literally, what I've got written down is, you can tell this is the post-atomic horror because they've got a dwarf and an Asian man.
Did you? What the fuck? Did you?
That's literally it. It's a weird. So if you haven't seen this episode, what happens is they're traveling along to go to Farpoint Station. Q turns up, and Q is basically an omnipotent being, so he can do whatever he wants. And what he wants to do is put on his one-man show on the history of war. So he has a bunch of costume changes and plays various characters as he explains that humans should maybe piss off back to Earth, which, bearing in mind that of the crew he's talking to, Tasha Yar's not from Earth. She's from the only Federation planet that has war crimes. Deanna Troy's a half Betazoid.
Yeah.
Worf's Klingon, and Data's from like a fucking tool shed somewhere.
Yeah, and Picard's from France.
Which isn't, so... Surely part of Picard's defence should have been, you accuse me of being warlike, and yet I'm from a country that consistently surrenders.
I will defend the French, mainly because as a Scotsman, it's kind of in my cultural history. But aren't the French well known for, if things even get a little bit bad, they will declare war on themselves until things are better?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, so...
but yeah.
I have written down, does Q have a point?
Yeah, I think that's fair. Does Q have a point could be the separate name for this show. Because is in response to being told that they're too warlike, the first thing Picard does is order them to prepare the photon torpedo. Worf they're basically at this point, because Q is God. I can't stress that enough. He has all of the powers of God, and he's like, at one point in this they try and fly away from him, and he has to chase after them. And as will be established in later episodes involving Q, he's just dicking with them. Yeah. There's no way they could possibly escape. Worf wants to basically go to war and die horribly fighting Q, and is ordered not to do this, which makes him very upset.
Why? That's my question, right? So part of Starfleet's kind of mandate, right, is that they have to respect other cultures as far as they are able to do so within Starfleet, right? And that's why Worf is able to wear the Klingon sash. That's why Worf has that extra thing to identify him as a Klingon, because people might just look at him and go, is that guy just a car crash victim? No, he has this sash thing on, right? And Picard says, he says to Picard, I'm a Klingon. If I was to die in war, that would be an honourable death. And Picard goes, no, you're a Starfleet officer, so you're going to do what I say. As if there aren't other Starfleet officers that he could have used to take over the saucer section while he was away on the away team. Do you know what I mean? Why even?
So yeah, that's a
put fucking thing to... right, because you have to put Troy in charge, right? You can't. Sorry, you have to bring Troy, because she is a Betazoid. So as a Betazoid, she is essentially kind of psychic, but not really. She can sense motivation. Right.
It's important to note that the Betazoid thing is that they're kind of rubbish psychics.
Yeah.
But then as an additional layer on that, Troy is rubbish at being a psychic.
Yeah, she's like a level of psychic where you wouldn't really trust her to do anything, but if you went to her as a fortune teller and paid her 20 quid, you'd come away from it and go, that wasn't necessarily 20 quid wasted. That's like the level of how good a psychic she is. She's basically fine. She's a slightly better psychic than everyone else on the bridge.
Troy has a really bad habit throughout Star Trek of... It's the equivalent of, like, she's watching, like, Boris Johnson give a speech, and then she'll just turn to Picard and go, Captain, he's hiding something. And it's like, what
So... okay.
So this one of the things the Enterprise can do is this one can do, the old one can, is they can take the saucer section off the front and put that off to one side so it's not in peril, And this is a really useful thing that will be done, I think, 4 times in the entirety of TNG, even though there's loads of occasions where they should totally do this. But it was one of those ideas that looked really cool, and then they realised that to do it is 5 minutes of the episode gone. But there's a bit where you see everyone running around, and I want to point out, God, the uniforms are shit. I'd forgotten about that. There's a bit where one guy walks past and he's wearing a one-piece suit with tiny little shorts, and it makes it look like he's wearing a skirt. He is wearing a skirt.
And I have made a note of that because I said that there are several male-presenting Starfleet members wearing skirts. It's good, but doesn't continue. Because I remember noticing it the last time I watched Encounter at Farpoint, thinking, hey, that's cool. In the 23rd century, dress how you want, you know what I mean? Dress the way that you feel inside. Good for you. But I don't remember that ever coming up really ever again in any of the subsequent episodes I've watched.
Yeah, they didn't.
No, they could have put Harry Kim in one. That would have given him a bit of personality.
Speaking of bit of personality, they go down, once they've separated, they go down to the battle bridge, where immediately a guy who was clearly cast as just a random bod we could have in the background turns up and steals the fucking scene, because because Commander O'Brien's here. What's his rank? Chief.
He is Transporter Chief. Well, he's not Transporter Chief yet. He's Chief O'Brien.
Yeah.
My favourite Star Trek character, by far.
Yeah, he's good in Next Generation. He's fucking fantastic in Deep Space Nine, like to the point of gives us his casual racism against the Cardassians, who are the only species in Star Trek you're allowed to be racist against because they are legitimately the worst. Combined with him being one of the best engineers ever, and the fact that he describes one of his ancestors as being more than a hero, he was a Union man, because he's a full-on communist. O'Brien's the best.
Star Trek, I mean, we something else that we're not going to go into until it comes up, because there's a very interesting story around it. But we know for a fact that Star Trek, like all of the best shows, is pro-IRA.
Yep. Yeah.
And we'll get into that soon. So they go down to so Q, once they're on the battle bridge, which, by the way, is a clear reference to the original series, because it's kind of it's the same format, but Q then takes them to an approximation, or it could be real. I don't really know how Q's powers work, but he takes them to a courtroom from the 2070s. And my favourite thing about him is that Q's entire shtick is that he's saying, look, as a higher being, I don't trust humans. I am going to put you on trial for all of the horrible things that your ancestors have done. Data then stands up and says, in 2036, the new United Nations made a law that no one could be made to answer for the crimes of his race or forebears. And I put, now, as much as that seems like a very positive thing, what's the chance that law was drafted by someone who just didn't actually understand what the phrase white privilege really means?
A bigger and more important question that we need to raise about that seemingly good step forward is that's already the law now.
Yeah.
I can't be put on trial because my grandfather was in the IRA, which he probably was. But yeah, that's already the law. Anyway, this is the post-atomic horror courtroom area, which, as I say, you can tell it's post-atomic horror because they've got a bunch of little people and an Asian guy.
Did you notice that the Asian guy, the bailiff, was Shang Tsung from Mortal Kombat?
I fucking did.
Yeah.
Shang Tsung, just weird. Does Q outrank Shang Tsung in terms of ridiculously overpowered creatures who are only on a basic level because they're dicking with you? Because Shang Tsung, I'm not going to get into the lore of Mortal Kombat. That's its own podcast. I've also like to point out that this scene is the scene that is a notable Star Trek moment, because it is the scene in which Q has his best ever hat.
And it is very, very, it's highlighted by the wonderful way in which he is brought into the courtroom, which led me to write, why don't all courtrooms have a spotlight?
And a levitating chair.
Yep. My favourite thing that happened in that courtroom, and I'm all for a Star Trek Next Generation courtroom drama. Personally, I think Measure of a Man is the best Star Trek Next Generation episode. As far as I'm aware, like I say, I haven't seen a lot of it, but of the ones I have seen, that one is the best because it's a courtroom drama. It's about a big question: is an android a sentient being? It has interesting character development as well as character interactions with Riker and Picard having to go against each other. Also, Picard's speech in Measure of a Man is his best. But my favourite thing about the courtroom scene in this episode is the uniform that the soldier guys have to wear, which comes with a little box that has a hose connected to it that distributes cocaine. You see him take and Q brings this up. It's not like they must need that to breathe because the air is toxic. No, Q literally tells us earlier in the episode that little box is a box to distribute drugs that you hold to your nose, press a button, and then you feel a lot better about yourself and lose track of how long you have spent explaining to your friend the exact plot of your screenplay. But when one of those guys is taken down, Q says, "Take him away." And the next thing you see is a shot of his foot with a rope being put around it and him being pulled away. And my question, is it the rope guy's first day? I have never seen anything less secured by rope than that man's dead body.
That's the problem is, it's not that guy's first day, but he'd just done a bump. That's fine.
Do you think a problem with the British and American court system is that not enough of the people working in it are actively on drugs?
I don't think that's a problem with the British court system.
No, I think you're right. I also like that courtrooms in the 2070s took inspiration from Jerry Springer.
Yeah. I also again, I cannot stress this enough. There is no universe, even if you're holding people responsibility for the crimes of their species, Data is completely innocent.
Yep.
He's as I don't even know how old he is. I know he's gone through Starfleet and he's done all the courses, but he could have done them in like a week. So like Data could only be like 4, right? We have no frame of reference for this.
I was
Although we
hoping
know he gets older.
No.
Well, we know he gets older.
Yeah.
And what I say, I know he gets older. What I mean is Brent Spiner is still playing him. So I don't know. I think with this, like, because it's established, like, he was created by, God, I can't remember the guy's name. He'll appear later, but he was created by a scientist.
It's Noonan Singh, because it's the same surname as Khan, but I don't know if they're connected. I don't know if I've ever found that out. There are likely people who are listening to this who know much more about Star Trek than we do, who are currently screaming.
But yeah, and he created him, he created Law, and he created a third one that's not put together in a cupboard somewhere.
Yeah.
And all I know that, like, he's a really he at this point is dead, but also just because Star Trek stuff, you see him later on.
Yeah.
And he's very old, but I don't know. Because he didn't give birth to Data, I don't know if like Data's been like Data could have been created last Tuesday, but we have no fucking clue. Yeah. And I like the fact that Tasha Yar just gets frozen solid.
I wrote, "Is this the best take of Tasha being frozen?"
Because
she's full floppy.
Yeah, she's frozen and she falls backwards. And these days, if you were doing that, you'd clearly get a quick resin 3D print of Tasha Yar in a frozen thing so it could fall over completely. Maybe have an hand come off so you could show off the sick bay later. But no. Shit, they just spray her with fake snow and ask her to fall over. Anyway, as part of this fair, there's a fair trial that takes place, and Q orders guns to be pointed at the crew's head and then to be shot if any word other than guilty comes out of their mouths. So Picard, Picard pleads guilty provisionally.
Yep.
Right. And then, Data does a thing that he literally never does again, when he then plays back the recordings of the court, and he does the voices of Picard and of Q. But also, while he's doing that, his lips are moving.
Yep.
But can't he just open his mouth and play this from whatever speaker he's got?
Well, here's what I have to say about that. Is the reason that Data never does it again is because they discovered on that day that Brent Spiner isn't very good at lip syncing.
So I will point out as well, right? Okay, that this in this whole area is basically decided by Q. Farpoint is going to be the test to see whether or not the human race is worth keeping around. Which, I would have preferred being given the chance as the human race to choose a representative.
Yeah.
Also, this is Starfleet, which represents a myriad of different worlds, but apparently it's just humans on trial. Anyway, I will point out that if at this point, if this is the encounter, right, the encounter doesn't happen at Farpoint. It's an encounter and then Farpoint.
Yep.
So the episode name's wrong.
Well, maybe it was encounter at Farpoint, like an email address.
Encounter at Farpoint.space.
Yeah. So
okay, and then that's the first 30 minutes basically of the episode. Is a lot of setup and not introducing several very important characters.
I have a question so far.
Okay.
Why is Picard such a dick? I didn't really remember this, and most of the Star Trek I have seen from later, Picard is, in my mind, the best captain.
Yeah.
But he's such a dick in this.
Yeah, he is. Bear in mind that they're in a very peculiar situation, and all of the crew is on board with him being in this peculiar situation.
But surely a captain's number one job should be, if you find yourself in a peculiar situation, keep your head.
Yeah. There's plenty of points where Tasha Yar's like, "Oh, let's shoot him," and he's like, "You want to?" And instead of saying no, I think that would be a bad idea. He's like to Tasha, he's like, "You want to start a fight with what is essentially God? Are you fucking stupid?"
Yeah.
It's like, no, she's your security officer. She likes shooting things with weapons. That's literally her fucking job. You chose her and a Klingon for your bridge crew. What the fuck? Jesus, he would have chosen these people specifically. You assume. But,
and then he's very standoffish to Riker later.
Yeah.
What an asshole.
I've got written down in my notes here, the next thing that happens is Riker shows up and for some reason is on a D&D map with Hero Forge furniture. Because he's like in a dark, blank... Riker turns up and he's clearly in... It doesn't look like he's in an episode of Star Trek.
No.
He's in like an earthen cave.
Yeah.
That leads into... this guy's room. What's the guy's name? Something like Groppler Zorn?
Groppler Zorn.
Okay, at the beginning of the episode, in the credits, this guy is credited as just Zorn, which means Goppler is an official title in his people.
Yeah.
So I'd like to believe that at some point there was like a vote Zorn for Goppler campaign.
Is there... two notes I had about that scene. Number one... is there something to Starfleet people or Star Trek characters eating apples?
Yeah.
Because there is James T. Kirk always eats an apple, or he's not always, but he's known for eating an apple in important scenes. And to me, the reason that came about is because Riker is, I guess, supposed to be the Next Generation's Jim Kirk.
Yeah. I think the plan was you have your diplomat, Picard, as the captain.
Yeah.
And the idea was that Riker was going to be the guy who went on the away missions and slept with the green space women.
Yeah.
Or if this whole gamble didn't work out, you can kill off Picard, promote Riker, and do like a traditional Star Trek show. I think that was kind of their thinking.
I think you may be right, because there's clues, to me at least, in the story and the way that the narrative is framed, that Riker may have been the main character of the show. Yeah. But they don't bring him in until nearly the second episode, essentially.
Yeah, which is it's also worth noting that the fruit that the apple that Riker eats did appear from nowhere.
Yeah,
which would suggest that it's some sort of evil fruit. So that's just.
I also so Riker then comes to the Enterprise.
Oh, before that.
Oh, sorry, go on.
Before that, on the station, Riker attempts very clumsily to flirt with Dr. Beverly Crusher.
Hey.
All I've got written there is I've got written down Beverly Crusher is here, the only person who has fully realised their character at this point. And I've just put, sadly, Wesley is also here.
I put, did Dr. Beverly Crusher start fancying Picard when he brought her husband's dead body home to her? Or was that later?
I would also like to point out as well, so I've got written down, is that Wesley is instantly a cunt. Like, it's not like he turns up and he's slightly annoying. He turns up and immediately is like to Riker, he's like, oh, sorry about my mum, she's shy about new people. It doesn't mean to be cold and standoffish. And it's like, fucking wind your neck in, child.
Yeah. Fuck you. Wesley, to me, I'll be honest, Wesley is a character who grows on me. I actually quite like Wesley by the end.
I would want to clarify. I first of all, I think Will Wheaton is the man.
Oh, he's top lad.
Top lad. And Wesley Crusher has his downfall is that he is the focus of a lot of episodes in season 1.
Yeah.
Which are just bad. And as a result, he comes across as just bad. But he's also in some really great episodes later on when the writers were better.
It's also very indicative of an issue that a lot of TV shows had in the 90s, which is that they wanted kids to watch, but these people who were born, as you say, in the 20s and 30s, didn't think that children would be interested in watching a show that wasn't about other children. So they have to bring in a kid's eye view, but the problem is the kid's eye view character is almost always insufferable. I don't want to be Wesley. I wish I was a lot more like Picard, but I want to be like Riker. No kid is watching this going, I wish I was Wesley.
No kid is watching Transformers and thinking, "Oh man, I wish I was that human boy." No, I want to be Hot Rod.
Yeah. I want to be a robot that turns into a car. What about it?
Yeah. But yeah, you're right, because they did this in everything. Like, there's like a little kid in like Buck Rogers in the 25th century, and like all of them did this. And you're right, every single one of them is an insufferable wanker.
Yeah.
Also, I've got to say, from the way things are worded, right? I'm just going to put this out there. Did Picard murder Crusher's husband? It's like, what's said is he came back with his body, which doesn't fit with any official, like, Star Trek, like, Starfleet rules that are later established. They tend to have funerals in space. Did he just turn up one day with a corpse, drop it down, and he goes, so it happened to your husband there. Oh, on a minute, somehow my knife's got in him.
1987, Gates McFadden as Dr. Beverly Crusher is so fit that, given the chance, I too would murder her husband if it gave me a better shot of getting with her. So I wouldn't put it past him.
Yeah, I don't think, if you've never watched classic Star Trek, I don't think we can do a good enough job of explaining how hot Beverly Crusher is.
Yeah,
it's like she's a different fucking species.
The show, the show desperately wants you to fancy Deanna Troi, which, to be fair, Marina Sirtis, you know, I sorry that as two straight white men we have descended into speaking about how fucking attractive the women characters in this show are, but the show desperately wants you to fancy Deanna Troi, I think they've not realised like how. I think maybe it came about because it came out at the same time as The Little Mermaid, when a lot of little boys were suddenly discovering how much they love redheads, and then this show is putting in a cool, smart, fun, momish redhead, which isn't my number one type, but it's up there.
I think if we're going to look, Star Trek is a very progressive show overall, and I think if we're going to do this, we have to call out when it's fucking not.
Yeah.
So let's just address this. There are 3 female characters in this show at this point. One is blonde, one is brunette, one is a redhead. And if you think for a moment that wasn't a deliberate decision by Gene Roddenberry, if you don't know anything about Gene Roddenberry,
he was a bit of a pest.
Yeah.
There's also that thing of the 3 female characters all have wildly different styles, even just of clothing. Did you know? We'll likely get into this in a later episode, but the original uniforms for the Next Generation Starfleet were like a one-piece spandex that was incredibly uncomfortable, and at one point Patrick Stewart was told by his doctor that if he continues to wear it, he's going to give himself permanent back problems. So they decided in the 3rd season to turn it into a 2-piece spandex set, which worked a lot better, apart from all the female characters who were all forced to wear the one piece because it fit their figures a lot better. So, yeah, Star Trek isn't perfect, it is a bit problematic, but it's a lot more progressive, I think, than even, some shows these days. What the fuck were we talking about before we fell into that hole of having to explain ourselves because we were like, Beverly Crusher's pretty fit?
The next part I've got in my notes is just that Riker gets to be the first person to beam up in the Next Generation.
Yeah.
He gets a full-on beam up. And then, like you, I've just got written here, Picard is kind of a dick to Riker for little or no reason. I have written down,
it's a good thing that they had a copy of Encounter at Farpoint to show Riker on the telly.
Right, I have literally, Riker is shown a copy of the episode.
Yeah.
It has... It's like you couldn't use B-roll from the other cameras, for fuck's sake. Right, okay.
So basically what we're talking about is Riker sits down. So Tasha Yar says, I'll catch you up on what's happened. And rather than using that as the way that it's normally used, which is as a narrative device to say, off screen, I am going to catch this character up so that we don't have to explain to him what is going on in the plot. Instead, Tasha Yar sits him down on a chair in the bridge, turns on an iPad on the screen that literally just shows scenes from not only the previous episode, from literally still the episode we are currently watching.
The thing is, what's really annoying about this is if Riker had realised what was going on, he could have fast-forwarded to the end of the episode and worked out what was going on. And then they put the ship back together. Mm-hmm. Which Riker does manually for some fucking reason.
It's because Picard wants to test him because he's a dick.
I'm gonna use a phrase that I feel I'm gonna use a lot throughout this podcast, and it's probably going to become a running thing. Data should be doing this.
Let's make that a segment. Right, so for all the episodes from later on, because I have an idea for a segment later, which is this a good episode of Star Trek? But I'll explain more about what that means when we get to that section. But the other segment should be, what are all the things in this episode that Data should have done instead?
Right, okay, absolutely. And I've also got that here. So then Picard and Riker have tea at a really big table. And it's important to note that at this point, they are on a Starfleet mission. Picard has just taken command of this vessel. He is meeting his first officer for the first time, and he has just had an encounter with a being that is essentially a space god that is threatening the human race with either total destruction or confining them to Earth forever. But none of that is as important to Picard as letting Riker know that he fucking hates kids.
Oh, I wrote here. So, despite being second... So what happens is that Picard brings Riker in and he says, "You're very highly recommended. I'm looking forward to working with you." Now, Starfleet have, for some reason, put me on a ship that has a lot of children on it, and I don't like children. So your job is to keep me looking genial. And I wrote, so despite being second in command, Riker's apparent main job on the Enterprise is to not make Picard look like an asshole to the kids.
So, you know, it's later established in like some of the episodes that the Starfleet have access to drugs that can wipe your memory of the last like little period. And how much of Riker's job is just putting that drug in the mouths of kids that Picard has just hit?
Yep.
Okay. The thing I want to talk about that happens in the next scene because it's something I've literally never noticed before. Right, and it's fucked up. Okay. The next bit is we get the scene that explains that Geordi is blind.
Yep.
And his visor lets him see. But what they also mention, very briefly, and it's kind of skimmed over, is that the visor also causes Geordi to be in constant pain. Now, to get into some of my own backstory on this, I've got a tumour on my inner ear that presses against my brain, and I have to take medication to stop that from happening. And for about a solid 7 months, I had a headache for 7 months. The fact that Geordi doesn't spend most of his time just crying is a testament to the man's iron will. It's casual, just so casually mentioned, oh yeah, I'm in constant pain. Right, we're not going to bring that up or ever mention it again. Just to have that in the back of your head. Geordi is in constant physical pain all the way through Star Trek.
And also, the visor... it doesn't work the same way as the human eye. It doesn't let him see the way that we see. He essentially kind of sees the way that Daredevil sees, mixed with Predator. So for his constant migraine, he doesn't even get very good vision.
He doesn't even get to close his eyes.
No.
And have it be dark.
And to kind of metagame for a bit as well, once again, it isn't until, I believe, the third season that they create a visor that the actor LeVar Burton can even see out of. So in a lovely ironic twist, the actor playing Geordi is blind, playing a blind man who can see.
Yeah.
Sort of. Can see.
It's the reason why Geordi doesn't have the visor in the movies.
Yeah.
It's because LeVar Burton refused to do it.
Yeah. And LeVar Burton can do whatever he wants. That man taught an entire generation of children to appreciate literature. If that guy doesn't want to wear a painful, blinding visor for your amusement, fine.
And the worst thing is...
you can wear painful contact lenses, LeVar. Know your role.
When he takes the visor off, right, in this scene, he's got like 2 little implants either side of his eyes with like LEDs going.
Yeah.
And his eyes are whited over using like a contact.
Yeah.
That would have been fine.
Yeah.
If you could have told us that the little LEDs are the scanners. I don't know what a scanner in fucking Star Trek looks like. You could...
Because also, it's not immediately apparent what the visor actually does. Unless you watch the first episode where they explain that he uses it because he's blind, you might think he uses it to look cool. It's not like anyone constantly comes around and goes, hey, Geordi, how's blindness going for you? And he's like, it's fine. This visor gives me about 10% vision and 90% headache.
I do like the fact that one thing that is good about Star Trek is that Geordi isn't just the blind character. Because as we will find out later on, his defining characteristic is that he's an incel. He thinks just because he got on well with a hologram of a woman, the real woman deserves him owes him sex. Yep. So, fucking Geordi. Oh. All I've got here is McCoy turns up now from the original series.
Yep.
And I wrote, this scene is wonderful. And then my next sentence is, oh, McCoy's done a racism.
I wrote, did Bones leave the Enterprise to become a fancy talking lawyer? Boy, what am I doing? Why is he using a completely different accent? Like, it hasn't been that long. It hasn't even been that long since he played fucking Bones in The Undiscovered Country.
There's still more Star Trek movies to come out.
Yeah. He is currently playing Bones at this point. Why does he have a different voice?
I love his space cardigan that I've got written down there. It's definitely it's the only thing. Yeah, but anyway, he's like he meets Data, and we have it explained that Data's an android, and McCoy is like, "You're not a Vulcan, thank God. I hate them. Yeah, can't even say you human these days. If you do, they'll put you in jail.
Put you in the brig. If you even say you're human."
Yeah, but this is basically a scene in which one of the previous cast of Star Trek turns up to go, "No, this is real Star Trek. Stop complaining."
Yeah.
To people in like 1989. It's a lovely scene. It's a genuinely great moment.
So I'm going to correct you there and say that this came out in 1987 because the last holdout of Star Trek fan who managed to get this way through the episode. When you said that Star Trek: The Next Generation came out in 1989, that would have been the straw that broke the camel's back that would have made him turned off.
Okay, yeah, it came out in 80s. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter when it came out. It's about the fucking stories.
Set in the future, dickhead. Yeah, fuck you. Who cares?
I didn't have time to write it down, but I was going to attempt to try and write down the star dates and see if they make any fucking sense.
So apparently Next Generation is when they start making sense at some point.
Okay.
But in the originals, they literally just left it up to whatever freelance scriptwriter was writing that week to just write a random series of numbers.
Oh god, there's a line in one of the Star Trek movies where they say you're the only ship in the quadrant.
Yeah,
it's like that. That's literally a quarter of the galaxy. How is that?
So, at one point, so after Riker watches the first episode of Encounter at Farpoint, he stands up and he says, he calls that a little adventure. And then I said, why doesn't Picard reply, wait till we tell you about us having to do an old-timey courtroom drama? Which Picard never tells him.
It's a fair point. Yeah, he's only got the Act 1 of Q's play.
Yeah.
This
is also... Sorry, go on.
This is where Riker and Troy bump into each other, and that we find out that they've got a past because they do a telepathy.
Yeah.
And she calls him some weird name that I've seen this scene so many times and I've never been able to remember what the fuck it is. But it's some weird Betazoid pet name or something, I don't know.
Is it Picard that's standing next to them while this is happening?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, well, they have a weird, sexy psychic conversation.
They have a sexy telepathic conversation that lasts about 30 seconds. So, from Picard's perspective, are these two quite handsome people just staring at each other for half a minute with, like, literally their jaws open and their eyes making movements? What does he think is going on?
I think it sets things up nicely, because I think Riker probably does that every time an attractive woman walks into the room. Just stares at them straight for a good 30 seconds. Probably licking his lips. I reckon Riker is basically responsible for 90% of HR complaints on board the Enterprise. Anyway, we're back to Troy does that telepathy, and then I've got Picard makes it awkward. And then, so this is where the episode gets a bit weird, because simultaneously they're supposed to be dealing with the problem, but also they've got a lot of shit on board the Enterprise they want to introduce you to.
Yeah.
So like you've got like Zorn trying to like having arguments with Starfleet, but at the same time Riker's just being impressed by an Alexa.
Which, to be fair, in 1987, I would have been very impressed by.
Yeah, and then the holodeck turns up, which shaves a solid 20% off the shooting budget for future episodes.
Does the holodeck never appears in the original series, right?
It appeared in the animated series.
Right. Okay. Interesting.
It's not a very good version of the holodeck, and it's installed on the Enterprise at some point. But here's the thing: nobody's sure if the animated series counts.
Yeah.
Because certain writers like it and certain writers don't. So either the events of it didn't happen, but also certain events from it definitely did because they've been referenced in other shows.
Yeah.
No one's really sure.
I'm fine.
That's when the holodeck. Yeah,
I liked it. I think that was the only Star Trek I liked when I was a kid.
Yeah, that's perfectly fair. It was actually really good.
Yeah. Let's not for now, because obviously we're running a double parter here. I feel like how the fuck does the holodeck work is going to be something that we'll get into in much greater detail in later holodeck episodes.
Yeah. No, we will, because there's some stuff in this straight off the bat. A rock bounces off the holodeck wall, even though I'm certain that's not how it works.
Yeah.
And Wesley gets wet, and then he walks out the holodeck, but that's holographic water and shouldn't be real unless the replicators are making the...
I think that's what's happening. We'll get into it later. My question about when he falls in the water is, why does the water have depth if it can't possibly be lower than the holodeck floor? But anyway, again, we'll cross this holographic bridge when we come to it, and hopefully not fall off into an infinite amount of space containing water.
Yeah. I've also got in this section, again, Riker, it's now his turn to do a racism. When he tells Data that he's not comfortable with him being an android, which, one, even if you're not, don't say it to his fucking face.
Yeah. Bring that up with Picard, who'll set you straight.
Yeah. And two, why? Here's what bothers me about this, right? It seems that everybody meeting Data is like, this is the first they've heard of him.
Yeah.
But, like, imagine there was a real android on Earth now who was, like, going to school and shit, right? Everyone would know about him.
Yeah.
It would be, it's like, is there no... Because until the advent of Deep Space Nine, we don't meet... Deep Space Nine is when we meet the first reporter in the history of Star Trek, because it's Jake Sisko's kid.
Mm-hmm.
It's Jake Sisko. So I don't... Is there literally no news? If I'm on Earth and I'm not in Starfleet, do I have fucking no clue what's going on?
So I'm going to do the cardinal sin of podcasting and reference another much better podcast.
Right.
There is an episode of the Cracked podcast where Cracked contributor Jason Pargin, aka David Wong, made a point that I think is so clever that I constantly try to bring it into conversation and no one gives a fuck. Which they were talking about, I think they were talking about 9/11 and the news response to 9/11 and why it's been 20 years and we're still talking about it. And he says, well, you know what? Yeah, 3,000 people died, right? But here's the thing. 3,000 people die over in, say, Syria today, no one cares, right? Because that happens all the time. 3,000 people died on 9/11 because planes crashed into a building in America. That is incredibly unlikely, and that's why we're still talking about it. The more unlikely something is, the more people will talk about it. If tomorrow, at, say, a wedding in Tallahassee, a portal to another dimension opened up, and an ungodly tentacle reached out, grabbed someone, and took it back into the portal with them, that would be the only thing that anyone would talk about for the next 100 years, regardless of whether it ever happened again or not. All of our defense money would be spent on protecting us from portal tentacle monsters, even though demonstrably this is the thing in the universe we are safest from. So I agree. Yeah. It's madness that a artificial humanoid is not the fucking thing that everyone talks about all the time. Hey, have you heard about that guy who's a robot? Like, of course you'd be talking about it.
Yeah, it'd be like, you would imagine they would have had him on like Jeopardy. Like if TV or any form of entertainment is a thing, like nobody at any point turns up to just interview Data and be like, "You're an android. What's that like?"
Yeah. Yeah, unless he right. Here's my take on it. I think that someone probably did, and he went, "What's it like being an android?" And he goes, "Well, using logic, I've only ever been an android, and I don't know what it's like to be you, so I can't explain to you what it's like to be me that's different enough from being you that you would be able to report on that." And the reporter went, "Fine," and that was the article. And then everyone in every bar is like, "Did you hear about that guy who's a robot?" And they go, "Yeah, he just seems a bit boring."
See, this is the thing. I would. I wouldn't mind this so much if it wasn't for the fact that it happens again in Deep Space Nine, where the security officer is a shapeshifter, which again is utterly unique within the universe. There's only one of him. They don't know where he's come from. There's no how is that not the only thing he lives like? How is that not the only thing anybody coming to that station wants to talk about?
And do you know what's really weird? I don't know if this is just a thing of like me being super self-involved, but I would love to have Data as a friend. Yeah. Because your opinions would matter so much more. Because he isn't able to have opinions on things like the way that we do. So he'd be like, well, why do you think like that? I'll be like, oh my god, well, thank you for asking, Data. So anyway, back in 1997, a lot of people voted for Tony Blair. Blah, blah.
Yeah, just the ability to be able to go to Data, I'm going to show you Ghostbusters. This is one of the greatest movies ever made. And then have him go, why is this one of the greatest movies ever made? Well, Data, I cannot express how glad I am that that anyone has finally asked me that question. and you are not, it's not possible for you to get bored with my answer.
Yeah. Strap in, because Ghostbusters is a 2-hour-long movie, and for the next 3 hours, I am going to explain to you how Ghostbusters is a film about nothing. And you wouldn't have think that this was 5 hours wasted.
I'm gonna explain to you how a movie in which people discover definitive proof of the afterlife, but is actually a movie about starting a small business.
I'm going to explain to you about how a comedy movie works when none of the characters grow or learn in any way, which should not be possible. Oh
man.
I'd love to have a Data friend.
I think it would be the best.
I might just start talking to my Alexa.
No, you see, no, don't do that.
Yeah, because they learn, don't they?
We'll get Skyneted.
Imagine Skynet took over and sent out all the Terminators, and a Terminator just showed up to your door and went, you have 5 minutes to explain to me why you don't like Ghostbusters 2, even though it's basically the same film. And you're like, no, it's the same plot, it's not the same, fuck you. And then it executes you. That's the test. Can you calmly explain why Ghostbusters 2 isn't very good?
That's the Turing test, isn't it? It's like, can a robot convince you it's human in a conversation? It's like, all that robot needs to do is have one movie opinion it is willing to argue to the death.
Yeah.
Like, just program it's like, it's a normal computer, but it thinks that the fourth Indiana Jones movie has some merits. Right, okay, go on.
Yeah. All right, fair enough. You're right. It was just nice to have Indy back and see it in the cinema. Fair enough. You are a person. Here's your social security number.
Right. And I've got. We should getting back to my notes for the episode. I've just got written down after the holodeck scene. Wesley continues to be unbearable.
Yep. Yeah, because he says to Dr. Crusher. He says, "Oh, they also have a low gravity gymnasium," and I wrote, wouldn't a low-gravity gymnasium be the opposite of what you want?
Yeah.
Like, because that just makes weights lighter.
I thought about this, right? If I lived on board the Enterprise, I would set the gravity in my quarters to 1.2.
Yeah, so would I, yeah.
Yeah, just so I'd get jacked just by doing nothing.
You'd become 5'7" after a while, but... It's the future, and women don't care about that anymore. So whatever, or guys, whatever. It's a free for all. Men in skirts, do what you want.
It doesn't matter if. Here's the thing, right? Okay.
What do you think the Starfleet version of Tinder is?
It's just the holodeck. Why would I bother talking to a real woman when the holodeck exists? Like, it's hard. It's difficult. You got to put some effort in. The holodeck. There is a. The guy who created the Dilbert comic strip is a terrible human being. He did once say something that is completely true, which is the holodeck would be the last human invention. I have a computer simulation that's basically as good as reality and can meet all of my possible needs. Oh, I'll go. No, I want to go do something. Fuck off. I can barely motivate myself to do something with a PlayStation as my only distraction. What the fucking chance do I have?
Oh.
Here's an interesting question for you. If you were playing Dungeons and Dragons in the holodeck, do you play as your characters, or do you just have a really good table where you can put the models down and like everything, like pop up the maps?
I mean, if you're genuinely asking, I think I would want the latter, because I think a big part of role playing games for me, ironically, is not playing the role. It's kind of being the strategist who decides my role. So yeah. I don't think I would want... I think I would want to say, make this happen. I would want to be a director more than an actor.
Yeah.
But I don't want to be a dungeon master because I have no interest in extra work.
So we need to basically get Matt Mercer from Critical Role's brain copied by a computer for Star Trek purposes. Right.
Done.
So yeah, this is the point. We're now into like the last third of the episode, I guess.
Yeah.
And this is where they realise that they've not actually dealt with the plot. So Troy, Tasha Yar, and LaForge go on one, split up on go one way, and Data and Riker go the other. And at this point, something that will become an ongoing problem in Star Trek happens, which is that Troy is too psychic to actually be useful. This is about the third time in the episode that Troy has cried due to her psychic abilities, and also because she is a woman written by men.
Yep.
I've just got that spooky shit happens. Picard doesn't want kids on the bridge, but lets Wesley on because he wants to fuck his mother.
Yep.
And then again, I've just written Christ Wesley as a tool bag. He gets to sit in a chair like a little fucking prick. Right.
I think we've told this story on the podcast before, but it is one of my genuinely favourite stories. Someone once asked Sir Patrick Stewart, who, by the way, delivers this entire episode as if it is Shakespeare.
Yeah, he's amazing. He's better than the show deserves at this point.
Oh, yeah. And then the show catches up to him, and it is Jeff Kiss. So he told a story once about the time that he met Neil Armstrong. Neil Armstrong came to the set of The Next Generation, and Neil Armstrong, observing correct protocol, asked Sir Patrick Stewart's permission to sit in the captain's chair as the captain, and then Stewart said, Buzz Aldrin just went for it.
The last time Buzz asked for permission for anything, he didn't get to be first person on the moon. So now he's just in a forgiveness asking mode. I'm going to do it.
Do you know what? That's my headcanon. I fucking love Buzz Aldrin. I think he might be my favourite living person.
Yeah.
Other than my girlfriend and my parents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excluding people I actually know. It's so amazing. Okay. So another ship shows up. And it's fucking massive, which is... I say it's massive. It might just be... They might have just put it closer to the camera. And it does a big purple scan. And then it starts firing on the abandoned city next to Farpoint. And at this point, to anyone who's ever watched an episode of fucking Star Trek, what is going on is painfully fucking obvious. To the point where I feel like watching back the ship recordings of Kirk's missions should be like... here's a question.
Because they obviously have that, because Riker can just sit down and choose Season 3, Episode 4.
Yeah. Here's a genuine question I have about being in Starfleet. Is the wacky science fiction bullshit that happens consistently to the people on board the Enterprise, is it weird that keeps happening to them? And it's like, that's why they're the flagship. They go where the weird stuff is. Or is this consistently happening across all of the Starship vessels?
I think it's consistent, and the reason is that, again, Patrick Stewart was once on the Infinite Monkey Cage podcast, and when Professor Brian Cox asked him, why do we never see the episodes where the Enterprise encounters a planet that maybe doesn't have anything interesting happening on it? And Patrick Stewart says, well, we just didn't show those episodes. It's a bit like the people get incredulous. They're like, come on, Scully, it's season 8 of the X-Files. Why do you not believe Mulder at this point? My defense has always been, well, we only see the times when it is a paranormal thing. 90% of the time, Scully is correct. So, and that's just the standard money laundering schemes that Mulder and Scully have to deal with on a Monday to Thursday basis.
This isn't an X-Files podcast, but I do need to bring up, Mulder doesn't rationally ever argue his case. he every point he makes the decision to act in the most psychopathic way available and just does shit that it's the reason Scully doesn't listen to Mulder is because go back and listen to Mulder.
So
right,
I have written here, these phasers are rubbish.
Yeah, I'll give you that. They should be destroying the shit out of that abandoned city.
No, I mean the actual design. Like, it's like a TV remote. How the fuck are you meant to aim that with any precision? Yeah. We've had the gun design for centuries, and it works. Why did and they had the gun phasers in TOS, and I think they were great. I wonder, was it a thing of Gene Roddenberry's to kind of be like, let's make this a bit less gung-ho and have the phasers be a bit more pacifist, almost.
Yeah, I can see that, because when you get into later, after Roddenberry's death, you get into like Deep Space Nine had the Dominion War, and everybody's walking around with phasers that are essentially assault rifles.
Yeah, totally.
So they're not. I think that sounds like a Roddenberry thing. Like, he had some weird things. He didn't think the zips should exist.
Yeah. He also insisted that by the time we get to the 23rd century, inter-person problems will not exist anymore. So issues between work colleagues simply won't exist, which is surprising because Picard is an absolute prick in this episode to everyone. So what I think he means is everyone will just do what the captain says at all times. No matter how big a knob he is.
It's easy for Gene Roddenberry to have had that opinion as the executive producer of stuff. If only everybody would do exactly what I said they should do, everything would be fine. But they won't. That's Jesus. I've got they fire on the other ship shows up and it fires on the abandoned city, and Picard ignores requests for help. And orders an illegal kidnapping.
He literally says the words illegal kidnapping.
Yeah, he says, this is an illegal kidnapping, I'm going to order you. Someone brings up the Prime Directive, which has no relevance to this point.
Nope.
Because they don't even know. To be clear, if you don't know, the Prime Directive is, you don't, if a civilization hasn't developed the warp engine, you're not allowed to fuck around, you're not allowed to talk to them. But they're here, they're already talking to these people, so presumably they've got a warp engine. And I also keep mentioning that the Ferengis eat people, which is just not true from what we learn of the Ferengis later on. So he's just a horrible racist stereotype.
But
Picard's one step away from saying that the fucking Ferengis all come from Bongo land.
and they're in charge of all the money. Oh wait.
Yeah. Just to be clear, so if you do need clarification on this, if you've never watched Deep Space Nine, I can sum this up. The Ferengi, they're space Jews, but they're bad. And the Bajorans are space Jews, but they're good. So
the Bajorans were almost like an apology for the rampant anti-Semitism that is the portrayal of the Ferengi.
Yes. Q turns up. Is kind of a dick. But Picard Picard at this point has pretty much worked out what's going on, and in case you didn't work it out, it's such an obvious Star Trek plot. The Farpoint station is actually a life form. It's the same life form as the big ship. They dump a load of energy into the one on the planet. It comes up. They both turn into space jellyfish, and fuck off.
Standard plot, textbook.
Standard textbook Star Trek. Which takes everybody involved way too long to work out. Troy cries again, but I've written here Troy cries again, but at least she's in fucking uniform. And then one of my all-time favourite moments, Q is ordered to leave the Enterprise and then does, but only because he was going to leave anyway, and then immediately comes back to prove his point.
Here's my question.
Yeah.
And I kind of hinted at this earlier. What actually makes a good Star Trek episode?
Okay.
And I have written 3, arguably 4, criteria that make a good Star Trek episode for me, which is 1, big questions.
Okay.
2, exploration of the human condition through metaphor. And 3, quality bits of captaining or tactics. Like a nice Picard's keeping things close to his chest and no one can figure out why. And then when you find out, you're like, oh, that's a top bit of captaining, that is.
Yeah.
To me, that's the 3 things that go into a really good Star Trek episode.
Yeah, and I will say that's separate from what I would say makes a quintessential Star Trek episode. Because to me, a quintessential Star Trek episode has one of 3 things, which is something is making the crew act weird. Something has seized control of the Enterprise. And the third one is, these Romulans can't be trusted.
Well, is this a quintessential Star Trek episode?
It has another classic Star Trek, which is the being we can't possibly understand.
Yeah.
And it has that twice because it has Q as well. As to yours, does it have it have a big question? I suppose it has the big question of, if a space jellyfish lands on your planet and is hurt, is it okay to enslave it?
I think, yeah, that is a joke, but I think that is like an interesting point. Like, do you have, as sentient beings, do you have the right to turn a being that has a type of sentience that you don't understand into an asset?
Yeah, and it is a fair question, because you
Yeah.
could do that, because it's not like it's something we as a species haven't actually done.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't understand whales.
Yeah.
We've done a lot of very intelligent animals that we've done very horrible things to, but it's fine because we're smarter than them.
Yeah.
So it does qualify that. Does it have any quality bits of captaining? I would argue no.
No, I agree.
Throughout this episode, Picard is a dick. He doesn't even manage to eloquently argue the case for humanity against Q. Like, by the end of it, I'm like, yeah, Q's got a point.
Yeah.
Like, he turns up, like I say, he turns up and accuses you of being too warlike, and your first response is arm the photon torpedoes. Rather than like, turn off the engines, turn off the shields. How are we warlike? Do what you want. That's what.
The only thing that even comes close to a good bit of captaining is the separation of the saucer section from the battle bridge, which you think is done to save the 300 lives on that starship, but then, as we're told later on, Picard doesn't give a fuck about any of the kids on that starship. He's just doing it, A, to make Worf look bad, and B, because they had spent a lot of money on that gimmick and needed to put it in the pilot.
Yeah, and also, weirdly, it does establish that Riker is a very good pilot, which will be very important, I think, in 6 seasons. But yeah, no, it's the thing is, for an episode that has to do a lot.
Yeah.
Because with doing a new Star Trek, if you're not doing a direct sequel to the classic series, you have a lot of extra stuff. Like, you didn't have a ship's computer. Something else we forgot to fucking mention, actually, at one point in this fucking episode, because he's worried that Q's listening into their communications, he demands that all communications throughout the ship be done by printout, right? I haven't even got a printer, and it's only 2020. What the?
I have a printer, right? And if I don't use my printer for 3 weeks, it takes me 6 hours to get that thing to work. Can you imagine how long it would take Geordie to get all the printers on the fucking Enterprise working that haven't been used in 7 years?
How often do you reckon members of Starfleet teleport a printer into space and blow it up.
Yeah.
Just
also, Geordie as the chief engineer is presumably the guy who has to get it to work, but we are told that Geordie doesn't actually have normal vision. So when Geordie does the test print and it comes out and the printer says, has the cyan printed correctly, he doesn't fucking know, does he?
This is another problem as well, is even at this point, Star Trek has yet to predict the invention of Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
So lots of times people like travel between decks to hand each other pads.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's an episode that's got a lot to do, because you've got to introduce all the new tech. So you've got to introduce the holodeck, you've got to establish what everything is. You've also got to introduce a crew that is significantly larger than the main crew of original series. Because you've got the sort of, you've got Spock, you've got Kirk, you've got McCoy, but the only other major characters are Sulu and Uhura, who don't actually do much.
No.
And Scotty's again kind of an ancillary. But I think they were setting up. I'm looking at this. I think they wanted, when they were doing this, I think they were setting up Troy to be the Spock.
I agree.
Yeah. I think that they wanted to have a different take on a different otherworldly intelligence that like helps out the captain and is like helping him and advising him. But the problem is, this moving forward, they don't know how to write women. They don't know how to write counselors, and as a result, as this goes on, you'll discover Troy is a significantly worse counselor than Whoopi Goldberg.
I think what they tried to do is they tried to show something quite interesting, which is that they wanted to have a Spock-style character who, rather than not really understanding emotions, understands emotions too much.
Yeah.
Which is kind of... I don't know what was going on in Gene Roddenberry's head when it came to autistic spectrum disorders, ASD. Because Spock, famously, is seen as a kind of... kind of a hero to a lot of people in the autistic world.
So's Data.
And Data as well. But something that, autism is literally a spectrum. People experience it very differently. So there are autistic people with autism who do have too much emotion. They're hyper emotional. And that leads them to not really understand other people's emotions. So I think that is kind of an interesting thing. But then you're right, they don't know what to do with her. And because she is a psychic, the writers don't know how to write interesting plots where she just doesn't immediately understand what's going on. And I think it's a real shame.
It's the problem is they gave her a power that's too good.
Yeah.
Because she should instantly know. Like, if you want to do anything approaching an interesting plot where somebody is keeping information secret, which is basically the core of how you write drama, is one character knows something that the other characters don't. Mm-hmm. Without that, you can't really do anything. So they kind of end up having to sort of, a lot of the time she's not around, or the best you'll go is, Captain, they're hiding something. And it's like, but so am I, because I'm not telling you my PIN number, Troy. It's, it's like... You should,
Troy, if you think for a fucking second I am going to tell you what Mark Program 1 on the holodeck is, you are smoking crack.
Oh, God, the holodeck, which is... Well, here's a question for you, right? There are multiple points. There are jokes made in in Star Trek where Riker goes to the holodeck, and it's made like a joke. Oh, he's going there for a quick wank. And yet, that's like, nobody makes too big a deal of it. But when Barclay is later shown doing the same thing, it's suddenly shown as like a really damaging thing, just because Barclay is less likable than Riker.
Yeah. Once again, another story concept from The Next Generation that is done better in the Orville.
Yes. But yeah, I think this is a reasonably good. I think for a pilot, for any crack at Star Trek,
pretty good.
This is pretty good. But like, I can see there's a lot of the original series fingerprints all over this. But
there's a lot of the proposed Phase 2 stuff as well. I feel like, again, we should get in for if anyone who turned off when you said this came out in 1989 rather than 87 went, I have anger issues, and I'm going to get back into it. So
yeah.
At this point, if you had said this is purely made up of the DNA of the original series and not mentioned Phase 2, the proposed 1970s Star Trek show, they would have given themselves a heart attack.
Which, again, much of the, if you're familiar with this, much of the design work and stuff that they was doing for that second Phase 2 did become Star Trek the Motion Picture, which we will talk about, I imagine, at some point, because it's a film that you can watch, and by God, is it dull.
It's terrible. No, it's not terrible. It's fine. It's fine.
Somebody watched 2001: A Space Odyssey and said, "Do you know what the best part of this is? When a ship starts off really small and far away, and we watch it until it's close. Let's do that."
It's never going to make my top 10. It's fine. No. I believe in judging things on their own merits and from their own time. This is the pilot. The writers, the actors didn't quite have the characters down. They didn't have the dynamics down. But they're going to get there.
It's really weird as well because, like I say, you have issues like Geordie's not chief engineer.
Yeah.
Tasha Yar. Look, I like Denise Crosby. I think she's a fine actress, and she left the show. I think she didn't think her character had enough to do, and I can understand that. But when you see Worf at the tactical display, suggesting constantly that they blow everything up, that just seems right.
Yeah,
it fits in a way that Tasha never did.
Yeah, I agree.
And I imagine they could have done something really interesting. Tasha Yar feels like she would have been more interesting as like a Deep Space Nine character. When it's when you got time to really dig into backstories because you're not going anywhere and you can do full episodes of shit like that. But there's a lot in this where it's there's the template of what could be great, and unfortunately, it's downhill from here for about a season and a half.
Fuck it.
But we haven't even agreed. Are we doing these every week?
Yeah.
Yeah, fuck it. Yeah, so join us next week.
If we've got fuck all on, we might accelerate it to 2 a week just to really get through these seasons.
Yeah, but we'll get this one edited and out at some point. What we'll probably do is, and this is just some admin that you can listen to. If we record every Monday and then release the one we recorded the Monday before, that gives me plenty of time to edit it.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah. Okay, so join us next week for what is the second episode of Star Trek The Next Generation? Because I've never fucking checked. I've watched Encounter at Farpoint a bunch of times, and I've never gotten further than that because then I immediately skipped to season 3 because I've got shit to do. So let me look this up. What is the next episode? I've got a sneak suspicion I'm going to look at it, I'm going to recognise it, and then I'm going to be sad. Right. Join us next week for The Naked Now. Oh god, no, that's not bad actually.
Nice.
Right, okay.
All right. Engage.